Happy July 13th, 2020. My name is Christopher Saunders, and this is the Connecticut Sports Talent Show, where we talk all things talents in Connecticut. And on today's show, we have the Wethersfield girls basketball head coach. His name, Jeff Russell. Coach Russell, it's great to be able to have you on.
Hey, it's great to be on the show, man. I love what you do. I think it's a great thing. I mean, with our absence of sports going on right now, I feel like your show does a great thing to kind of feel like Connecticut sports is still kind of happening and going on. So I appreciate that.
I really do appreciate that. Thank you, Coach. It's great to be able to have, the many coaches and players that I've had on here throughout what is now close to 3 months that I've been doing this show. And it's great to have you on. And Coach, I think before we get into your time with Wethersfield, just kind of go over your background, because I always like to ask coaches, their avenue of becoming a coach. And I know your path is quite interesting.
So I grew up in Enfield, Connecticut. I went to Fermi High School, played football for Fermi High School, which is now closed, Fermi and Enfield. Played basketball there, played baseball for 2 years, and did outdoor track and field for 2 years. Football has always kind of been my sort of favorite sport, but I was that kid who football season, I hung around with football friends and played football all the time. Basketball season would come and I'd have all my basketball friends, and I played AAU and did all of those things. So football and basketball have sort of kind of been those two main sports I've really been into. I went to CCSU freshman year. I wasn't playing any sports, playing flag football and those kinds of things on campus. A couple of my friends were playing football, and I really got the itch again to play. So I kind of started to work out. I went and spoke to the coaches, said, hey, I'd love to join the team. How can I do it? They said, you can be a walk-on receiver. I kind of knew throughout that process, being in a Division I program, that I didn't really see a shot for me to play. I traveled some games. I traveled against UMass. I got on some special teams here and there. The biggest part of it was being a part of a Division I program. The caliber of player and caliber of coach that I was around really started to increase my knowledge for football. I survived in high school and had some success because I was a pretty good athlete and I was really competitive. I got to college and the things that these coaches were talking about and the things that my teammates knew already about reading coverages, about pre-snap and post-snap reads from the secondary, like these things were things I didn't know from high school. I mean, I was the wing T quarterback. I mean, our plays were sort of concrete. The amount of stuff I just absorbed in college, the 2 years that I kind of walked on and played, were as valuable to me as getting any playing time. So even though I didn't really get playing time and I don't have the numbers or the video of me playing in college to kind of say it was a great experience, the amount that I learned becoming a coach really kind of played a major role. While I was at CCSU, a kid in my phys ed department by the name of Scott Basil, he's actually the Xavier boys head lacrosse coach. We were in some classes together. He was an assistant football coach at Plainville High School. And he was in class, we got talking about football, and he asked if I was interested in coaching. So I went with him one day to Plainville, sat down with the coach. Rest was history. I ended up being an assistant at Plainville to kind of start my coaching career in 2004.
That's awesome. I mean, hey,
yeah.
I think for you be able to, become, like you mentioned, a walk-on, I think first off, it kind of, in some ways, I think you going in as a walk-on showed you, like, you didn't go in with that attitude like, hey, I'm this big, jock, I'm this big athlete, I'm a stud. No, you went in with a nice level head, but also too, you took to the coaching that seems to have really kind of stuck with you even now.
Absolutely. Totally true. I definitely went into it grateful to be back in football. Realized the amount of sacrifice that it was going to take to kind of be a college athlete. I mean, it's time consuming, the weight training, the meetings before practices, the meetings after practices, the Sunday meetings. It's a lot, but the learning the game, I mean, it felt like I was taking a class that I was really interested in, like sitting in these meetings and learning things from my coaches about reading coverages, about route concepts and offensive personnel packages and why we're doing this. I mean, it started to be something that I was really interested in. So that kind of fueled me to kind of stick out those 2 years, even though, I mean, I was getting banged around. I wasn't getting a lot of playing time. I was kind of the scout team kid getting run over and that kind of stuff. But it was still something I had a great time doing.
And from that point forward, I mean, you've had many, many roles, not just with Plainville. I mean, Enfield, you were an assistant coach for football. Wethersfield, you were an assistant coach. You were the offensive coordinator for Stafford Summers. You think about other sports, softball, track, basketball. You were with the girls' basketball program, the boys, and now the head coach. I mean, you've had so many roles in so many different sports and positions. Do you think in some ways that kind of has made you a better coach because now you've seen I know you've seen both girls and boys, you've seen different sports, and now it kind of gives you maybe a different perspective than somebody who's coached one sport for 30 years, let's say.
I've been fortunate to coach on some teams with some great kids, to be a part of some great coaching staffs, and I've coached a range of sports that are both where players are motivated completely differently. I mean, talk about a really successful football program, Wethersfield, where we're thinking we're going to go win a state championship, and also coach at a team like Fermi that was hoping to win 3 games a year. I mean, going into that season saying, if we win 3 games, 4 games, it'll be an awesome season. Dealing with players that are playing football in a Wethersfield town that's a soccer town, and helping to turn that around and kind of make football that sort of top sport there, when kids can be motivated to do other things. And if football's not inviting and something that's not successful, they don't stick around. They didn't want to early on, and sort of helping turn around that stigma of what football could be in a town like that. Coaching girls sports, where sometimes the motivation to play is completely different. There's a wide range of ability levels and a wide range of interest levels. Some girls are playing basketball because they eat, sleep, and breathe basketball, while some are playing basketball because that's what they've been doing since 5th grade. That's their winter sport. That's what they do. They're comfortable with that. A sport like track and field, where some of the best athletes are the ones that are intrinsically motivated and not always driven by a coach. There's no X's and O's that you're drawing up. It's just, how much does this kid want to be pushed, and how much can I challenge that kid to sort of get better? My first year at Wethersfield, I was just an assistant coach, coached the receivers, and there was a quarterback on the team, Tyler Murphy, one of the best players this state's ever seen. I mean, he went and played quarterback at Florida, finished his career at Boston College, played for the Steelers and the Dolphins for 2 seasons, and now he's a receivers coach at University of Tennessee. Stepping into that as an assistant coach really opened my eyes up to the caliber of high school football player and what a transcendent player is like. After that, becoming the offensive coordinator, my first year as an offensive coordinator, 2010, you lose a kid like Tyler Murphy, and I take over as the offensive coordinator the next year. We actually made the playoffs for the first time in school history that year. Had some really competitive kids that were really hungry, that enjoyed kind of what I was doing offensively, sort of changing what we had done in the past, making the game a little bit faster, a bit more fun, a bit more creative, giving some players some input on the offense. Over those first few years as offensive coordinator, my head coach at the time, John Campanello, gave me as much freedom as I think any assistant coach has ever had. I'd come to practice with made-up formations, with something I saw on TV, and he every time was like, yeah, you know what, put it in, let's see how it looks. And I mean, that creativity combined with a little bit of confidence helped me out early on. And this is probably not common for offensive coordinators. My first 3 years as offensive coordinators, I coached JV as well. And so I was the varsity offensive coordinator and a JV coach. And the reason being, I'd go to JV games and I'd try trick plays. I'd try formations. I'd try different things like that, see how they worked, and then put it in for next week. Some unbalanced stuff, some trick play stuff. And I mean, that was a lot of fun. It was like having your own live practice against a different team to kind of put things in on the fly. Those offensive coordinator years at some really successful seasons. I mean, we went undefeated, lost in the split playoff to New Canaan one year. I mean, going down there and playing at that field, that's a that's a once in a lifetime sort of atmosphere to be a part of. I mean, that felt as close to college as I've ever been a part of. Next season, we go to the semifinals, lose a close one in North Haven. 2017, I got the head girls basketball job. That was my last year of doing the Wethersfield offensive coordinator and being the head coach at the same time, and it was a lot. We had just had our second son. He was 1 year old. My oldest was about turning 4. So I decided to kind of give up the football part so that I could put everything I had into girls basketball. At the same time, my buddy Brian had been 1 year in at Stafford and said, hey, you want to come over, install your offense, and kind of be a game day coach, sort of an assistant coach. I went to 1 or 2 practices a week, installed the game plan. Credit to his coaches and him and his players, because they bought in from day one with this sort of offense that was all hand signals. It was all no huddle, and none of them had any experience with it at all. And there's always bumps in the road. It's like learning a new language. And they bought in. We had some bumps early on. I mean, our first scrimmage, I don't think we gained a yard. And I mean, it's real easy at that point to go, this ain't working. Let's get back to our other stuff. But we stuck with it. Ended up having a great season there, going to the playoffs, getting to meet, winning the first round playoff game against Bullard Havens Tech, and then going to play Ansonia and making it really close for a while there. I know Brian's talked about it, where, I mean, we had a chance on a 60-yard screenplay. I remember the play. We go H orbit motion behind the back and throw a slip screen to the back left side. Kids running all the way down the field, gets drilled at the 1 yard line on about a 60-yard run to fumble. That would have given us the lead. That would have been the first time Ansonia had trailed in like 3 seasons. So, I mean, that would have been huge. The next season, I just went on game days, kind of helped out. The full-time offensive coordinator kind of took over there. It was still fun to be a part of that. I gave that up and sort of dedicated as much of my time to girls basketball as I could. Going into girls basketball, my goal for our program was to make it a program, to make it something in school that everybody wanted to be a part of. And if they weren't a part of it, if they were playing a sport, something different, that they sort of envied our program a bit. And I don't know if that's always something that's common for a girls sport. I wanted it to be more than something that the girls just did in the winter. I support the other programs. I go to as many girls soccer games and field hockey games as I can. I go to volleyball games. I coach track in the spring, but I wanted basketball to be something that was a part of their lives 365 days a year. So we did some off-season strength and conditioning programs, which they hadn't really done in the past. We would have some meetings. We'd have a cookout and have a cornhole contest. We really try to kind of create a family atmosphere for that program, but to also make it something that you kind of missed when it wasn't basketball season and you want to get back to it.
I mean, Coach, it's worked. I mean, you've averaged what, 13 and a half,
We've won one more regular season game each year that I've been there.
Exactly. I mean, look, 2017, 13 wins, 2018, and this is just regular season. I'm not counting what you did in the playoffs.
Yep.
But in 2017, you had 13 wins. 2018, you had 14. 2019, 15, 2020, 16. I mean, you've gone up every single year, and it seems like whatever you're doing, Coach, it's working. And even now, and we'll get into this, a little bit later about how you've lost 96% of the team as far as the scoring and everything, but still, and I mentioned this to the coach up at hand, Coach Treadwell, it seems like both of you will be able to find, he's done it now, and he still produces 16, 17 wins a season. Right. I feel like with you, you're going to find a way to still get, even if you only get 13 wins, and let's say you're a number 15 seed, you're still scary because you know what you have. You're not going to try to put a system in that doesn't fit your players. You're going to go with what works for them, and that makes you even more scary as a team.
One thing that's been really helpful for our program, and my assistant coach that I mentioned before, Ryan Alger, he and I sort of came up with this game plan going into our second season where, and it's hard because most of these kids that try out for my basketball team, I taught 7th and 8th grade for years. This is my first year teaching at the high school. I had known a lot of these kids since 7th grade, and I care about every one of them that I've had. And tryouts, the hardest thing about a cut sport is obviously having cut kids. But we sort of needed to come up with a number that allowed for maximum participation in practice, a need for maximum effort, and a need for competition. What that did is that shrunk our roster down. So we had in our roster is gone, not counting my first year coaching. First year coaching, I kind of inherited a large team, had 9 seniors on it. It was really tough to sort of play with the roster. I also had 2 freshmen coming in that were just graduated, that were the school's all-time leading scorer and 1,000-point scorer. So trying to mix that group of 2 freshmen that are varsity ready to go with 9 seniors or 8 seniors that are kind of looking for their varsity time with a new coach, it was tough. So that second season, we eliminated the standing around in practice. We eliminated the bench with 15 kids on it. And instead, what we did is we shrunk our roster down so that combined JV and varsity, we had anywhere between 15 and 17 kids. That's it. And our goal is so that our JV team has about 7 kids on it. And we go to some games and some JV teams have 5 kids on the court and 10 kids on the bench. And I'm sitting there going, how's everyone going to play? How's everyone going to get on the floor? Our JV team, our team of 7 kids, is our varsity bench. So those kids, it's kind of a real simple and kind of funny quote, but I don't want anybody at the end of a game night to not be sweaty. You either sweated in the JV game or you sweated in the varsity game, but very rarely do players go through our program and not get to play basketball on a game day. Our decisions are made on players probably a little earlier. I mean, we don't ride out a lot of juniors on the JV team. I mean, a lot of our juniors and seniors are varsity kids, and a lot of our freshmen, sophomores early on are JV kids. Girls basketball, girls sports in general have a lot of impact freshmen, a lot of impact sophomores. So that still happens. But we've created a group of players, about 15, 16, 17 players that are all, in my eyes, varsity players. That allows for our practices to be up tempo. That allows for conditioning to be built into our practice. There's no standing around and waiting in line. We do 11-man, that drill that everyone does in basketball. Every coach knows it. And I mean, we're doing it with 15 kids. So there's no 4 kids waiting in line. I mean, it is just nonstop movement. We do a lot of full court 3-on-3, and we'll run it on 2 ends of the court. And like, the conditioning is built into our practice because there's no real opportunity to sit around and wait. And it gives every kid an opportunity to play in games. So nobody is just sitting there waiting on the bench. They're either playing in that JV game and playing a ton of minutes, because if you only got 7 kids playing JV, they're all playing. And then if those 7 kids are your varsity bench and they don't play in the varsity game, they're really not as negatively impacted by it because they just played 24 minutes, 25, 26 minutes of a JV game. It's allowed for our players to be really close together. We don't have that JV team is here, varsity team is here, and you don't kind of support each other. They're all one group. They're all in the same layup line together. They all pick the same warm-up music together. We all wear the same shooting shirts. We all wear the same uniforms. I don't have a JV uniform. I got one uniform like a football team. Football teams don't have JV uniforms. I mean, they all wear the varsity uniform, and that's kind of what we sort of created. And it's been nice because it's really created a tight group amongst our players where they don't feel like they're not a part of the varsity team, because they're a real part of the program because they're in that practice every day. I don't want to have to stop practice and go, wait. You can't cover Alice Kelly, who's a 1,000-point scoring senior, because you're a JV kid. Instead, whatever the matchup happens, that's what it is. And we've had sometimes where we'll play full court games for 7 minutes, 8 minutes, and we'll go upperclassmen versus lowerclassmen, and it'll be close. And we'll do shooting competitions with younger kids versus older kids, and it'll be close. Or we'll mix the groups up because the younger kids that feel a part of this program, and this kind of alludes to what you said about how we have an opportunity, even though we lost so many players, to still win, because those kids have all been a part of varsity minutes and practices and atmospheres for 2-3 years now. Even if they haven't played the varsity minute, they've been a part of the varsity game. They've been in those timeouts. They've been in those practices. They've been in those game planning meetings. They haven't been sent to the other end of the floor to work on JV stuff. They've been a part of varsity. They know our language. They know our motivator. It also allows us, much like a football team, to have 2 coaches coaching at the exact same time in practice instead of JV coach down there, varsity coach down here. I don't know if it works for everybody. I don't know if it works for boys programs. I know sometimes there's 30 kids in a school that could make a team and be good. our number at 15 works. Are there some kids that maybe get cut that could have made the team? Maybe. But as I'm sure any coach to attest to, no one's ever cut the third, second, or first best kid on the team. It's always been a kid hanging out down the bottom. And our tryout is 3 days of practice. And my goal in tryouts is to see, can you survive and can you contribute positively to our practice environment? Not how many layups can you make in a minute, not how many dribbles can you do with your right hand and dribble with your left hand. It's, can I run practice and I'll install a play during a tryout, I'll install a new drill during a tryout, and I want to see how quickly a kid absorbs it. I want to see if they can contribute to that. And I think it gives me a really good understanding of, I don't accidentally grab a kid who made 7 out of 10 foul shots by mistake when they may not be able to run the drills and run the plays or have the basketball IQ that's needed to kind of excel in our program.
Different strokes for different folks. And I think
Absolutely.
for every coach, every team, every program, there's going to be a different number depending on the sport and whatnot that kind of works for the team in and of itself.
Absolutely.
You did mention about, and I want to kind of compare this because this sounded awfully familiar. You mentioned how for basketball, you want everything to be kind of up tempo, everybody moving.
Yeah.
And then you mentioned for football, the same thing.
Yes.
So as far as no huddle, up tempo, keep the defense on their heels. So I don't know if you've ever compared the two, but it seems like the way you coach football is the way that you've coached basketball in that sense, where everything is always quick pace, keep everything going and never have to think about, okay, did I do this wrong? Just go right to the next play.
It's funny you say that. My second year coaching, that's when our basketball program really started to sort of take shape of what mine and my assistant coaches kind of vision for the program was. And it was about being fast and playing really up tempo and playing really hard-nosed defense. And Josh Howard from the Rare Reminder kind of said, and he followed Wethersfield football for years and knew I was the offensive coordinator, and said, this is starting to look a little bit like your football teams where they're playing really fast and playing up tempo. And I'm not a big mistakes guy. I'm not a big catching kids doing wrong. I'm more on catching kids doing right. In our basketball program, there's really not a bad shot. I mean, we sort of allow kids to take shots, and the way they earn opportunities to take shots is if they're playing with effort and energy, especially defensively, the shots are there. And the kids learn that if I push hard and I throw the ball ahead and I take a risk and I throw it to a teammate that's sprinting and it's a turnover, that it's not the end of the world. We're not a save for the best shot, because when you're coaching high school basketball in Connecticut, your team might have a soccer player on it, might have a swimmer on it, might have a volleyball kid on it, and it might have 1 or 2 basketball kids on it. You may be waiting for the best basketball shot, and it might be in the hands of a soccer kid who, if was playing fast and not thinking about it, they might hit that layup or they might hit that jump shot or that open three. Instead of saying, okay, we got you that shot off that ball screen off the elbow. Oh, wait, you got a flare on this because they undercut it. I don't know if every basketball, there's coaches that know that stuff. I don't know if all 5 kids on the floor always know that stuff. We sort of have decided to put a premium on playing fast and playing with effort, something we can control, and not always on drawing up an exit, like drawing up a play that's going to get this or should get this, because yes, those plays all work on paper and they work great. But if that X and that O are a little bit different and their mind's somewhere else, or they're not really a basketball kid, sometimes just the effort and the speed kind of gives you that advantage. I think you can overwhelm some teams in high school sports. Now, there's some really good teams who you do it to, and they look at you and they go, that's not going to work. And you got to go to the drawing board. And East Lyme a few years ago in the playoffs, I mean, we used almost all our timeouts in the first half. Everything we did, East Lyme had an answer for. They were destroying us. We couldn't stop them. We won in overtime because we hit 15 threes. That helps. Hitting 15 threes in a high school girls basketball game is a lot. It's a lot in any basketball game. But some teams have answers for it. There's some games where we've played over the past few years where our style hasn't necessarily worked. So I don't want to, it's not the holy grail for sure, but I mean, it's worked for us. And I think the kids enjoy it. They enjoy playing fast. They enjoy being yelled at a little less. They're being yelled for and a little less than being yelled at, which I think they appreciate.
I've always believed that this quote, it's not about the X's and the O's, but the Jimmies and the Joes.
Absolutely.
And I think as long as you have the players that can respond to you, I mentioned how you have Coach McKinnon and then you have Brian down at Stafford Summers and whatnot.
Yep.
comparing both those coaches. McKinnon, hard-nosed, definitely football coach, the voice,
Yeah. Yeah.
has everything. And
Yep.
then Brian, who he's not that intimidating, but he knows how to kind of, he's a nicer guy. He's a
Yep.
player's coach, but he knows kind
Yep.
of his style of coaching. McKinnon
Yep.
has his style, and they're both perfect for the kind of players in the program that they have, and they've
Yep.
both been very successful.
They're both really infectious personalities that you kind of feel like you're getting something from them every time they talk, every time they come up with something.
Exactly.
They're both guys who involve a lot of that want input from their staffs and from their players, and I think players really like that. Coaches love that as well. They love kind of having their voice heard, even if it's not something that makes its way into the game plan or into the practice plan. They love that opportunity to say, okay, this isn't a micromanaged program. This is a program that I sort of have a voice in. I've been given responsibility. I know Brian gives responsibility to his coaches, gives responsibilities to his players with his leadership councils and all those things. With the two different type of players that they're dealing with, they've both been able to sort of get their styles to work and not allow athletes or players or anybody that's around their program to take advantage of them, which I think is a huge thing, because I don't know if that's true everywhere. I think everywhere coaches sometimes are, depending on how much an individual player or how successful the program is, can be judged unfairly. And I mean, all of their players are in positions to be successful. They're all safe. They're all having a great experience. The wins and losses for them have also been there, but even if they weren't, I think they're still really strong programs. I don't know if in Connecticut high school sports, where the playing field isn't always level, that wins and losses can dictate how good a coach is. I think there's some coaches out there that win a lot of games that maybe are just in a great system with some great players. And then I think there's some coaches out there that are grinding it out with low wins. Maybe they don't make the playoffs, and they're just phenomenal coaches because those kids leave that program better. They leave better as a player. They leave the program better as a person. The school is impacted positively by those players and those coaches. And I think the wins and losses isn't necessarily always that key thing.
I couldn't agree with that more. I think it's, 100%. I've never been, now as far as if we're talking about college sports and pros at the Division 1 level, then I think that's a little bit harder to sell me on, because
I
that's a
agree.
different kind of, different kind
Yeah.
of sports. But,
Yep.
we're speaking about high school and others. Yes, I think we should definitely look beyond the wins and the losses. We should look more at, the players, how they develop, how do they become into society once they graduate,
Yeah.
or better yet, even if there's not a lot of winning and they end up playing they go off to play college
Yeah.
sports,
Right.
how are they going, and are they prepared for that? Because I know both playing in because I played college baseball for 4 years, and
Yep.
I played with a lot of guys who did not come from great programs. Myself, I did not come from a great baseball or a high
Yep.
school baseball program. And still we were able to translate, and we were very successful because we knew how to play at a certain, we knew our level, we knew our lane.
Yeah. I made the postseason in one sport in one season in my whole high school career, in all 4 years of 4 different sports. I made the postseason in basketball. 1 year we won 8 games. So, I mean, I agree with you totally there. You don't necessarily always have to come from a high caliber winning program to put together the ability to coach or the ability to play. That year we had Tyler Murphy. I mean, he went and played at Florida. There were some other kids on the team that went and played in college. I think we won 5 games that year, 6 games maybe. So it doesn't always translate. But I also think in Connecticut, especially, there's some inequities for each team. There's some inequities in the conferences, especially, and
Mhm.
there's some inequities in the programs. I mean, there's some small public schools that, I mean, whatever they get in their town, that's what they get. And then there's some other schools, choice schools, that have had some opportunities to get some players that maybe are going there for the sport. There's kind of free advertising if those schools are successful. So I mean, I don't think there's any one way in Connecticut, especially, to evaluate a coach or a program. Wins and losses are measurable, so I think it's the easiest thing for people to do, and I think that's kind of why it's always sort of, how many games did you win? That's the best team ever because they won this many games. That's the best coach because he won this many games. When it's I don't think it's always true.
Coach Russell, it's been great to have you on. I mean, I could talk to you forever. There is one
Absolutely.
more thing I do want to talk about
Yeah.
with you. And this is something I made sure I put in my notes
Yep.
to ask for sure.
Yep.
You are a big analytical guy when it comes to
Yes.
basketball. And you were telling me about before we came on this interview about how you do both before the first game of the season, the fourth game, playoffs, championships, etc.
Yep.
The way you guys do the analytical side is so much different than, and I haven't heard, and maybe it's because I haven't talked to a lot of girls basketball coaches, and shame on me. Hopefully more will want to come on the show after this, but just tell me about what you do with the analytical side. Because I know with baseball, there's Rapsodo, there's launch angle, there's all these, the Sabar community, like Brian
Yeah.
Kenny likes to call it.
Yeah.
But for basketball, it's a little bit different. So just take me into the very, what's what I'm looking for? Statistical side, I guess.
Yep. So there's a couple of stats that we really like. One of them is a rebounds per minute. And I mean, rebounds per minute is not low. And what it really ends up coming out to is sort of a rebounds per quarter. And if we can get kids to kind of just look at it and say, hey, I got to grab 2 rebounds a quarter. It's a real small number. It's really something that's easy for them to grab. That's sort of the one that it's not really analytical, other than it gives the kid sort of a clear-cut goal. Some of the ones that really get specific for us, I had a player on my team I talked about before, Alice Kelly. She's going to WPI to play basketball. Incredibly bright kid. One of the best players I've ever coached because of her selflessness. I mean, she is a team first kid, but she's a tremendous shooter. But she would get in her head. She'd get in her own head at times. And we had a whole shot chart. I mean, our athletic department supports us and bought huddle assist for us. That basically, at the end of each game, I upload the game film and it gets sent back to us with statistical breakdowns, shot charts, turnover percentage, how likely a kid is to turn the ball over, where our turnovers happened, where we're hitting our shots, where we're missing our shots. Everything that you can think of is kind of broken down. And we kind of convinced this player, hey, you may think your best shot to shoot threes is the left corner, but our data is telling you the right wing. And we would draw up some plays. We had some inbounds plays that got her a shot on the right wing. We had a half court set that would get her a shot on the right wing. I remember in a close game her junior year at Glastonbury, she hit 2 from this right wing that she would have never shot from if we didn't have this data to kind of put forth to her and say, look, you're shooting over 40% from this right wing spot. We do the same thing for our opponents. I'm probably one of the few high school coaches who goes and films high school basketball. I know it's still kind of a faux pas in basketball. I know football, I mean, maybe it's my football background, but I go and scout and I go and film and I watch these films and I find how kids score. I find if a kid scores in transition, wow, that kid hit 3 big threes. Oh, but they were really 3 for 10. Like they're not really as big a threat from 3 as we thought, or they were bad shots, or here's how they got to them. Or Newington, one of the things we come up with for them is, even though they're a small team, they're one of the best rebounding teams in the state. Mm-hmm. And you don't get that unless you're getting statistical data on each player and saying, when this kid gets 4 rebounds a game, or if this kid gets 6 rebounds a game, or this kid gets 2 rebounds a quarter, they win 95% of those quarters. And we go into those games and say, hey, this kid right here, I know she's a guard. I know she's 5 feet tall. She gets 5 rebounds a game. If she gets 5 rebounds a game, here's what they turn into. Here's their second chance points they get off of it. And now this kid has in our player says, I can't let this kid get the rebound. And you don't fall asleep and go, just put a big girl on her and know she won't get her rebounds, or box her out, yelling the things that you sort of hear the crowd yell. You hear parents yell all the time, don't let him rebound it. And box it, like, yeah, we know, like we're trying our best, but giving them actual things to say, okay, they're going after this shot while the kid's catching and shooting. They're not waiting for the ball to come off the rim. You can actually see the weak side player crashing the boards on the catch. That's how early they're getting in position for the offensive boards. So that's sort of the analytics that we go with. Some of our players, it's really about the turnovers and where you're turning the ball over, and can we try to get ourselves out of those areas on the floor. But they're the same for everybody. But it's really about finding out how opponents score and what they really do to win. Is it rebounding? Are they winning the turnover percentage? Are they getting second chance opportunities? that's kind of where we really put all our stock in.
Coach, we've just about run out of time, but I would love to have you back on the show because I would really want to dive in more into this analytical side with
Yeah,
basketball. Because again, I
absolutely.
haven't heard this from any other program. Baseball, different story, but not,
Right,
and even football, I've heard about it some too.
right.
But high school basketball, especially in Connecticut, I have not heard about this. So this is something I would love to have you come back on in the near future.
Absolutely.
If you'd like to.
Yeah, yeah, and I'll get together some more stuff instead of what's just in my
Hey,
head right now. Yeah,
please do. I
yeah.
would love information galore. Please, I would
Awesome,
love it.
awesome. That'd be awesome.
But that'll wrap things up here in the Connecticut Sports Talent Show. So until next time, everyone stay safe. And remember, CT stands for Connecticut Talent. And I'm on a journey to find them all. Have a good one, everybody.